Alright, part 6. The work with the Carmen painter. Section A. Work with the passenger train car. For the painting of the varnish for the passenger train car is done with the shop designated exclusively for that purpose. The design of the painter begins with the work. The repairs have been completed with the exemption of the car tire, trimming, the removal of the paint, burning off with the torch. The first work of the painter is to prepare the car so for the condition of the outside of the car is often such that the old paint must be entirely removed. The blow done with the wooden equipment with the aid of the gasoline blowtorch. For the steel scraper, the apparatus generally is used with called a hawkette burning outfit. The painter beheats for the small part of the surface of which for the varnish of the paint blisters and he scrapes it off. And an experienced man of the work would probably be burn holes in the lighter portion of the outside of the woodwork and the charge for the edge of the molding. So when the scraper, the sandpaper is used and leave the hollow, he must also use the care of the completing of his work with no spark of the torch that has ignited any of the concealed parts of the car, such as the paper felt or is sometimes found behind the panels of the woodworkers of some of the cars. He is also responsible for the care that he gives of the blowtorch, hose, and couplings in the tanks that is to be used. The burning off of the lye. Turning the torch method of burning off the flame of the varnish is not, however, the steel equipment. The paint varnishes on these cars burned off with a strong solution of lye, which is made of the very thick sticky of the soda to adhere to the side of the car. The solution is allowed to remain on the car overnight, then wash off the next day of the stream with water from a hose, which takes off all the paint and varnish with it. The man using the lye solution must take care that he does not get much of the oil in his clothes, or that some of it does not splash or strike him or possible in the eye. He must also wear rubber boots and when cleaning the car with a hose. Sandblasting. On some of the railroads, painting varnish is removed from the outside of the surface with steel cars by sandblasting. A special grade of white flinty stone is blown against the surface with a powerful stream of compressed air. Doing the work of the painter wears the variety of the gas mask and he has used both respirator and goggles in very uncomfortable work as showers and sand work, therefore weighing through the clothing is not next to the body. Surfacing. After burning off the outside of the car is gone over with the sandpaper. Any surfaces that are smooth and are made so after the priming with the coat of the color with the supply of the primary coat is generally cut off the rubbing of the wood sandpaper for the purpose of making it smooth. For the application of the following coats, the painter requires the experience for doing this sandpaper work. He must make the surface much smoother without the cutting through the cut of the paint, so the exposing the bare wood. The primary coating must be applied with it carefully so that it enters all the crevices, cracks, and scaled parts of the nail holes, etc., and on surfaces of the car. After the priming coat has been dried, the coat surface is applied with the usuing of the succeeding day. The coat must be carefully applied to all the surface defects in order that when his putty is applied, it will hold it into place. The whole of the crevice is not primed and receive the torch with the varnish. There is nothing to bind the putty with which for the painter fillers all of these holes. As a result, after the car has been completed, the putty will fall out of the loose and disfigure the car. And after all the coats of paint and varnish have been applied, putty. In applying putty of the holes disfigured parts for the surface car, the painter must use the proper kind of the putty and must be able to the proper the body. This is made must have the proper portion of the wet and dry. In some of the cases, he would use a lead putty or a heavy hard drying putty, which when the oil which was mixed with it evaporated will become almost as hard as cement. And whereas the other places he would use a soft putty, which does not dry quickly when the dry is not as hard. Application of the color. After application of the putty, second coat of the surface is applied after it is dried. The surface is sandpaper smooth, especially care of being used in spots that have been puttied. The primary surface of the colors are generally flat and dry quickly after the surface is dried out with sufficiently two coats of varnish color are applied. When the coats are colored, they have properly set with the cars and given the two coats of varnishing. In varnishing the outside surface of the car, the painter must first get on the center of the shop to the right with the temperature of the door of the shops are closed so as not to have the draw of the on his work. The varnishing of the car when the surface is cold, when the surface is cold, the car is dropped with will cause the varnish to crawl. The crawling of the cold would be likened to the attempt to spread the water evenly. Grease surface the varnish runs into the bubbles and streaks will not spread evenly on the surface of the car. No work is done with the paint shop that would be liable to raise the dust which would disfigure the cars that that are wet and painted varnish. Care in varnishing. The paint finds it necessary to use the scaffolding horse of the planks in order to reach the top of the letter board of the car of applying the paint of the varnish. That he must be able to be careful to do it in such a manner that there are no laps, brushes, marks will show. That requires considerable skill, the experience with the skill, or the best of the resulting varnish in the passenger car. There will be regularity of surfaces and moldings outside of the windowsills. Other projections, the varnish must be applied level. That is, thickness of the coat must be uniform over the entire surface. It must be inconsiderable. That it must be in proper consistency, neither to be thick nor too thin. Must be taken to in getting the best result, and not brush and not too much more, not too heavily. For when the outside of the skin is varnish begins with the colligated, which does quickly when applied with a heavy brushing at it. The time will be cause scratches on its surfaces that cannot be removed. mistakes due to inexperience. Working the painting is done entirely with mechanics, regular apprentices working under the supervision of the mechanic. After beginning with his day's work, he must generally be given a list of the cars in the shop which he must apply with the necessary codes of the color. In this next in order of the first and second, the codes of the varnish is necessary. That depends entirely on the judgment whether the last applied with the color of the car. Code of the color of the varnish is dry instead of the properly before he commences his work. Add this separate codes for the color that derive the different speed than experienced man would sometimes make the mistake of applying the fast drying coat of the colors before proceeding with the coat that has dried. This means that when the first coat of the color does dry, the glaze of the following coat will be properly correct. The experienced man would not be able to apply the varnish properly and would be not understand if the properties would be brushed too little and too much, with the result is disastrous to the appearance of the car. He would not apply the varnish evenly, whether the heavier would be fold over the portion of the lighter coat. He would also not understand the order in which the paint is each part of the surface, so that no brush flaps would be visible at the completion of the job. Alright, treatment given at the average car. The car given with the general repairs is usually given the primary coat of 2 coats of the surface and 2 coats of varnish color and with 2 coats of the varnish. Then 1 day with more is allowed with the lapse in between each of the day. In order the previous one they properly set and dry the inside. The finish is painted with the stain and varnish and the floor of the trucks and the roof of the given in the 2 coats of paint. The paint works continuously as he is required to move and from the car to the car, performing the work needs for the outside, inside of the trucks and roof of the car. Brushes and pencils, etc. The painter tools consist of 2 putty knives and 1 brush in the dusting of the surface of the car from after the sandpapering, 1 of the large mediums, 1 of the small paint brushes, 1 of the large, 1 medium, 1 of the small varnish brushes, 1 of the set stripping pencils, set of striping pencil for the railroad company, usually supplied with the brushes. The mechanics generally has own set of the striping pencils, which as they are become worn out, are replaced by the company. Section B, steel car painting, the puttying and the priming. If the painting of the steel car problem is met by the painter is sometimes different from the painting of the wooden cars. When the outside of the steel surface of the steel car has been rusted, the scaled, it must be harder for him to apply his putty properly as the intended would perhaps be 1/64 of an inch deep. Then he must be center of sandpaper the indentation spots from which they were scaled has been removed so that all the rust is possible to remove from the cavity. That he must be at the size of the hole with a priming and coat of the paint. If it is in judgment the priming will not surface to hold the putty, then he will place some varnish in the cavity, and he will find it advisable to use the hard drying putty that has been impregnated with the varnish in preference to the hardening dry putty that has been a mixture with lead and oil. These decisions, however, are left entirely with the mechanic. It requires considerable skill to place the putty within the cavity so that it binds him firmly around the edges. After it has dried, it must be surely enough to position the standing of the sandpapering. Alright, knifing in a panel. Often a panel with a section of the surface will be found to be badly rusted. Scale of the ordinary methods will not greatly improve the appearance. In case of the kind of the painter builds up an entire new surface of putty, the good job of the knifing and putty cannot be done unless the putty is exactly suitable. When the surface must show that no knife marks the job of the knifing, it must be perfectly done because of the following work will be more magnifying rather than the concealing any defects. Painting and varnishing. Applying the various coats of the colors requires the care experience to eliminate the drop lumps around the rivets of the car. They must combat the tendency of the paint of the varnish to sag at the bottom of the rivet of the head. But in the case of the varnish, drawing is covering from the upper half of the rivet head. Section C, inside painting. The floor of the car is given one coat of the paint after the drying of the wood. The painters commence work on the inside of the finish of the car. The treating the inside of the finish of the passenger car for the great variety of the conditions are met with the painter preparing the surface of the strain of the varnish. These are nicks and dents in finishing. Sometimes the veneer is cracked and bulged so lightly that inside the finisher has now extensively repaired, left to the skill of the painter to cover the defects. Some of the inside finish is new and must be treated from the bare surface of the wood, whereas the other parts have been painted from the varnish before the require the removal of the bad spots by being restrained varnished. Surfacing and preparing the portion of the new veneer, sometimes of the oak and sometimes mahogany. The painter must have the knowledge of the difference of the grain or surface of the woods in order to apply the first coat of the stain and shellac properly in order to bring out the grain and the natural beauty of the wood. In some shops, the wood filler is used, and others is stained in the same color as the wood is applied. In doing this to get the best result, the painter must know how to get the filler into the small cracks, fissures, to make up the grainer of the fill of the wood. The mahogany of the grain is one continuation of slight scratches and slight pores. The painter must manipulate his filler, rub it in white waste before it thoroughly dries in order to force it into all the scratches and hollows as the proper filling of the brings out the natural grain of the wood. In the event of the wood filler of the stain is not applied properly, after the varnish has been applied, the grain will not seem to be on the surface of the finished product, but rather appear to be behind the glaze and indistinct. There will be losing of the value of the beauty of the grain of the wood. Alright, varnishing. After the stain has dried properly, the painter applied for the coat of the rubber varnishing, which is rubbed down on the beams of the piece of the coarse cloth, powdered pumice, which is wet with oil, usually banana oil. The surface of the rubber unit into the coat of the varnish filler appear perfectly smooth to be experienced by the eye of the painter. After it has been cleaned out with the white of the waste allowed with the dry perfectly, the last coat of the clear varnish is applied with the work is done in the small manner that the varnish is spread evenly over the surface, not brush of the lapse or other disfigurement appear. Skill in varnishing. The varnishing of the molding of the numbers, designs, scrolls are found with the inside of the varnishing of the different classes of the car. Varnishing and staining must be also applied with the hollow indentations made with the carving are not filled with varnish or stain, which would cause the carving to stand out with a darker black line out in the bottom of each of the hollow. This is a skillful job of the grain with the hollow piece of the wood with the carving and the wood stand with the clear of the surface of the wood. Special treatment. All the inside of the finish of the car is not new, but it has been stained and varnished previously, is left with the discretion of the painter assigned with the car, with whether or not each of the piece of the molding of the other part of the finish required the varnish to be remove them that is restrained with the revarnish off the surface of the last coat of the varnish appeared with the result well. The good job of the rule result in the application of another single coat of the clear varnish with the knots will occur with the inside of the finish. But the painter must know the best method of preparing the knot so that the varnish will not side off the usually smooth surface. Some cases the same will not serve the surface from the knots of the painter will then use the shellac and better know of the proper properties after dyeing to hold the varnish in the knot and prevent it from slagging. There are many instances inside the finish of the coating. Some of the parts are made with the poplar corresponding with the rest of the inside of the finish for the painter stains the varnishes it so that only the experienced can tell the wood from mahogany. Seal car finishing. The seal cars having the seal inside finish with generally practice they have the seal inside the finish stained, but the grain is mahogany only as expert eye contact. I can sometimes distinguish the difference between the finished mahogany wood and seal finishes as mahogany. The majority of the railroad passengers riding in the seal finished mahogany never perceive that they are inside the finished metal. It is not wood when it is called to their attention that they are sometimes incredulous. They often can be proven to them that the finish is of steel by tapping in some hard of the object. The substitution is found but not to be sight, but by hearing the difference in sound. Graining. When the seal panels portions are bad in condition, becomes necessary to remove the entirely stain of the varnish, which leaves the bare steel. The bare steel is prepared with the primary coat of the painted, usually with the color of the wood to be imitative. This is followed by the coat of the stain, with which is grained by the mechanical, sometimes with a comb, but most often by experts by using a simple brittle brush with the grain brought out of the skill as imitation of the real wood that only the experience can sometimes tell by the sight of the finish of the metal. After the graining stain has dried, the surface is covered with the coat of the clean and varnish. Work on the sashes and doors while outside interior of the passenger cars is being prepared in the shop. The sashes and doors are undergoing similar treatment. The room assigned for that purpose. The problems are met with preparing the surface for the car inside with the out and or some preparing the sash inside and out respectively. Glazing. The painter cuts and finishes fits the glass with all the car sashes. He needs the special skills and experience to cut and fit first prismatic glass and fit together with the colored art glass that they apply with the Gothic sash. Proper method of varnishing door. And in preparing the door with the panel with the cross brace with the rail, the mechanical must know the proper method of doing work to avoid the brush and bark lap. The respective would be to the mention they hear him when the painters apply with the work on the car, but the painters union on the building the applicant with the use to give the door to finish the examination committee of the painter union judges his skill and his right of the title of the painter of the method in which he does his work on the door. And an experienced man will generally paint the varnish for the different parts of the door in order that it comes to him. In other other words, he is not familiar with the order of which the parts of the door must be finished to procure with the best results. Varnishing a door, the proper method is to varnish the panels first, and then when the sleeve of the laps, and finishes the stroke of the brush on the side of the rails and cross rails of the door. The cross rails of the varnish brush eliminates the laps of the top and the bottom of the panels, leaves only the laps on the side of the rails of the door, and as the side of the rails of the door is extended completely over from the top to the bottom. But when these doors are brushed out, when these are brushed out completely over the edge of the door, no laps are left by the experienced mechanic over the finished door. Section D, letters and stenciling. The passenger car painter must be able to do the lettering and stenciling on the outside of the car letterboard. Usually show the name of the railroad side sheeting near each end of the car. Give the car number in case the mail car, the buffet cars, the dining cars, and like of the title of the car will be lettered on the outside of the center of the car. Inside of the car, sometimes it's shown with the name of the railroad. The car name is shown with the door of the electrical mechanism, stenciled with the date of the last inspection. The oiling truck with the outside of the car, the stenciled on the side of the journals with the wave of the car, the stenciled on one of the cross of the tie timber, the description of the air brake of the mechanism together with the date. It's clean and oiled, the stenciled as the air cylinder, the triple valve, and the reserve, the gas tank, stenciled with the capacity and last date of the inspection. The amount of the stenciling differs with each for the type of the car. The painter must be able to determine the size of the journal, the capacity of the gas tank, the direction of the air brake mechanism on each of the car in order to have the mechanism made stencil for the car correctly and stencil it in every place when required. The cutting of the stencils is usually done with the varnishing room where the sash doors are treated by all the painters required to be able to cut stencils if called to do so. Pouncing. The method of applying the letters is following. The pouncing pattern, sometimes each of the letters, sometimes for a word number of the letters, is placed against the surface of a car and brushed with a solution of the chalk, which goes through the holes in the pattern, leaving the outline of the letter on the car. Seizing. The outline of the letter is then filled with the varnish side of the required of the car in order to make the outline with the letter sharper, given the curved portion of the letter correct. The letter then pressed with a gold leaf directly from the book in which it becomes into the varnish surface which it adheres to. After he varnishes the surface well covered with a gold leaf, he cuts the brush overlapping edge of the leaf from the outline of the letter. The must be familiar with the type of lettering of the standard for each of the cars, must know the parts inside and outside of each of the class of the cars required to be lettered. It will be understood that all the gold leafing lettering is done before the two coats of the varnish are applied to the car. Filling the outline of the letters requires the careful use of the small brush of letter. Use of the applied to any of the varnish outside of the outlining of the letter will be difficult to remove it without leaving the sticky surface with which the gold leaf will adhere to applied, thus making the outline of the letter irregular instead of the clear cut must apply with the gold leaf of the painter must be certain that seizing the proper attack and that is most having the proper degree of the set and size to moist of the left and apply with the will mix with it and too dry. The leaf will not adhere to the edges. Applying gold leaf. Gold leaf used in lettering to probably be the thinnest of the substance handled by the men. It is said to be required to 2,500,000 sheets of the gold leaf to make the volume of 1 inch thick. In applying it, the mechanics must use the care in catching the particles that he cuts and brushes off because it is value. On certain classes of the car, the lettering is to be done with gold leaf, but outlining of the letters is filled with the paint with various colors according to the style on the road. The painters of the when lettering does not receive the specific instruction, the kind of type of letters and the location that they must be put in, nor how much lettering each of the style of the car requires. All of these information must be a part of the shop knowledge. Making pounce patterns. The painter must make the pounce pattern used in lettering. In doing this, first assertion the length of the space in which the required lettering must be placed and make sure of the pattern. Accordingly, one of the pattern paper makes the outline of each of the letter roughly chalk flowers, making more carefully into the pencil. Using the pencil outline with his guide, he punches out the letters line of each of the letter, making the series of small holes in the paper. Although the work is done by freehand, it would require careful measurement to go over the inaccuracy of the spacing of the letters. Special work. Every time someone has something seen with the circus ram, every card with the fancy lettering, fantastic scroll, the work of the lettering ornament is often done with these cards, maybe of the Carmen painter. Very often, the work of the description of the painter received no specific direction. For example, the decoration of the car of Celius Floto Circus, the owner gave the painter only a verbal idea of what was wanted. Every detail was left in the originality and the orders of the painter. In dining with the buffet car, the power of the car's observation car, the private car, the painter required to finish all the furniture, chairs, and tables that are part of the equipment for these cars. The treatment of the chairs and tables is exactly similar to describe for the inside finish. The result of the job is the same as this requires the same skill as does any of the housing of the furniture. Or working condition. The passenger car painted work is not done with an excessive amount of speed, and an excess of the speed would tend to hurt the finish of the quality of each of the product. And most of the shop output, the output of the success of the great requirement of the painters would work very directly. Very steadily. The work is generally done with a well-lighted shop. The shop is free from the dust and the dross as possible. The temperature of the shop is maintained equally as possibly about 70 degrees. The work is maintained at the paint shop in the winter time is agreeable, but in the summer the painter suffers at times from the heat. The doors of the shop are required to be closed on account of the dross. But when varnishing the car, the fumes of the turpentine are much more obnoxious in the summertime than in the winter, as more of the oil evaporates. Discomfort from the fumes of the turpentine experienced more by the painter on the inside of the car than on the outside, because in fact the air is very close in the inside of the car inside of the shop is in the house. With the house, there is little movement of the air inside of it, and it aggravates the fumes from which the turpentine. The effect of the turpentine on the workers to make them drowsy. In some cases the man suffers a headache. At the same shop, the painters examine by a physician once every month to determine whether or not they are suffering from lead poisoning or some other disease peculiar to their occupation. Present, most railroad shops use less lead in their paint than they did in former years. This lessens the danger of lead poisoning to their employees. Observation of the painters are generally more anemic, the more appetites, the more unhealthy color than any other than car department employees. The painters use a great deal of the waste, which becomes saturated with the point in oil that must achieve the care of the clothes of each for the day. And the note that the waste that is left laying around the shop would be undoubtedly caused by the fire of the spontaneous combustion. In some shop, the apprentice is required to go with the car with the bucket and collect all the waste from the painters. Personal requirements. Among the personal requirements, the painter must have the deftness of the touch and considerable degree of the control of the muscles of the forearm, wrist, and hand. He must be able to vary pressure of the brush and control the direction of the sweep over the stroke with a very length. Must be able to guide the brush carefully, but both freehand and following lines. Must be able to directly point the edge of the front brush carefully enough so that when the painting of corners that he must done left with the brush mark, he will have not to know the vary of the brush pressure according whether he is working with the paint or the varnish, taking it all the clear with it is by the man who is nature awkward. The muscle cannot become a good painter. Even a person with the usual accuracy with the control requires a great deal of the training and the practice before he becomes a painter who can be classified as a mechanic. Alright, Section E, working on freight.